As just a little review of the brachial group on the anterior side of the brachial region, we had those three muscles, the coracobrachialis, the brachialis, and the bicep brachii. And again, it's the brachialis that is the primary flexor of the forearm at the elbow. The brachialis, that shorter muscle underneath the bicep brachii here, is the only one that's going to insert directly onto the ulna, and it doesn't cross the shoulder. It's going to attach itself at the coronoid process of the ulna, as well as the ulna tuberosity. So brachialis is the primary flexor. Bicep brachii is inserting down onto the radial tuberosity. So because it's associated with the radius, it also has that action of supination and pronation, right? So remember that the radius is the only one that's rotating over the ulna, and it's controlled by a few muscles, but one of them being bicep brachii. Okay, bicep brachii does supination, where it makes those two forearm bones parallel to each other, right? So like you're holding soup. Okay. So let's move on to the forearm, and we're going to look at muscles on the anterior side first. So these will all be flexors. All right. We have three groups. We have superficial, intermediate, and deep. All right. So we're going to start with superficial. Now, the majority of these muscles are going to have the same innervation as, which will be the median nerve. In the anterior superficial group, the one that's different is flexor carpi ulnaris. Okay, and we'll talk about that again. To draw some connections or just commonalities between the three groups on the anterior side of the forearm, the superficial group and the intermediate group all have the same origin. And if you're looking at your lab manual, you'll see that it's abbreviated with MEH. What that's standing for is medial epicondyle of the humerus. So I would make a note in your lab manual if you did not know what MEH means. Meh. Okay? Medial epicondyle of the humerus. All right, so we'll start with the superficial group. So we don't have to go over origin because they all have the same origin. All right, but let's pay attention to the innervation first. Okay, so we're in the brachial plexus, and as we're down in the forearm on the anterior side, we have two nerves that are going to be innervating these muscles. We have the median nerve, which kind of, again, runs medially and will help innervate some of the lateral portions. And then we have the ulnar nerve, which is going to be on the medial side of the forearm and be kind of innervating muscles more on the pinky side. Okay. All right. So we have four muscles of the anterior and superficial forearm. Looking at pronator teres. Okay, pronator teres. This one's probably the most obvious because it has just such like an angle. Okay, it's not actually crossing over the wrist at all, right? It's not coming onto the hand. So this one is probably the most obvious. This is pronator teres. Okay, so just thinking about the word there, pronator. Pronator is going to help us understand the action. The action of this muscle is to pronate the hand. All right. So if you're pronating the hand, that means you're moving the radius over the ulna. All right. Whereas the bicep brachii was supinating the hand, making those two bones, moving the radius so that the two bones in the forearm were parallel with each other. So because the pronator teres is going to be moving the radius over the ulna, we can assume that the insertion is going to be on the radius because it's going to be moving the radius. So it's actually going to be inserting on the lateral radius. So it's kind of like this middle portion of the radius. Okay, so it is on the lateral side that it inserts. So that's the pronator teres. Now the other three muscles are a little bit harder to kind of comprehend, but hopefully our names of the muscle gives us some indication of where these muscles are inserting and therefore what their action are. Okay, so again, all the origins are the same. So let's think about flexor carpi radialis. What do we always say about radialis? Radial is lateral, radial is lateral. So we're coming down and we're going to be inserting onto the radial side. Now, we don't insert at the thumb. We actually insert at metacarpals 2 and 3. Okay, so it's still towards the lateral side. It's still thumb side, but it's not actually inserting at metacarpal 1. It's metacarpal 2 and 3. All right. Now, because it's on the lateral side, we know that there's going to be some flexion because right there, flexor, but it's also going to abduct the hand at the wrist. So carpi is referring to it moving over the wrist, okay, and it's on the radialis, it's on the lateral side, so it's going to adduct. So it's going to move away from the medial. Okay, so it's going to adduct the hand at the wrist. All right, so the name gives us indications of where it's going to insert as well as what it's going to be doing. Okay. Then we can go to the palmaris longus. So palmar, right there in the name, palmar is referring to the palmar region, which is the palm of the hand. Okay, so we know where it's going to be inserting, and that's specifically called the palmar aponeurosis. And it only has one job, which is just to flex the hand at the wrist. Now, the last one of this group is the flexor carpi ulnaris. So just like the flexor carpi radialis, we can kind of make some assumptions right off the name. So we know that it's on the ulna side, so it's going to be more medial. Okay. So it's going to insert down at metacarpal 5 because that is where that's on the ulnar side. It also is going to insert on some of our more medial carpal bones, the hamate and the fusiform. Now, because it's on the pinky side, it's going to, yes, it's going to flex, but it's also going to adduct the hand at the wrist, right? Because it crosses the wrist, carpi. So because it's on the medial side, it can adduct, it can add towards the body, whereas flexor carpi radialis was on the lateral side, radial is lateral, and therefore it was abducting, moving away from the medial side. Okay. Now, because the flexor carpi ulnaris is on the pinky side, this is the one out of these 4 that actually has a different innervation, and it's going to be innervated by the ulnar nerve. Palmar longus, flexor carpi radialis, and pronator teres is all going to be innervated by the median nerve. Okay, so that was the superficial on the anterior side of the forearm. Let's go to the intermediate. So again, the origin is the same, medial epicondyle of the humerus. All right. So that's kind of gives us an explanation as to why the medial epicondyle of the humerus was so large. It was such a large protrusion, right? We always hit it on something. Anytime we kind of like hit our funny bone, we're typically hitting that medial epicondyle. It's so big, but it has to be that big because it's an origin site for so many of these muscles. Okay, so the muscle name is flexor digitorum superficialis, and it's often abbreviated with FDS. So you can see it on this image, abbreviated FDS, highlighted those letters for you. Make sure that you, of course, can always be complete with your responses. FDS is easy to study for, but of course you need to know what it actually means. So flexor digitorum superficialis is actually going to go down to the middle phalanges of digits 2 through 5. So it skips the thumb, it skips pollex, and it goes all the way to the middle phalange of all of these digits 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, and so you can see FDS, and you can kind of see that it splits a little bit before it inserts at that middle region, and that allows for the next muscle to kind of squeeze through and insert itself onto the distal region of these phalanges. Okay, so FDS, flexor digitorum superficialis, this is going to flex the hand at the wrist, right? Because it is crossing over the wrist, you can see here. But it's also because it's inserting at that middle region of the phalanges, it's also going to flex the fingers. Okay, so it's going to flex at that middle joint on your phalanx. All right, and FDS, flexor digitorum superficialis, is also innervated by the median nerve. Then we can go to the deep muscles of the anterior forearm. And we have, again, an abbreviation here, flexor digitorum profundus. That's what FDP was standing for. And that's that muscle that's going to squeeze through flexor digitorum superficialis. Okay? So there's 3 muscles that are going to be on the deep side of the forearm. Okay, again, FDP, flexor digitorum profundus, flexor pollicis longus, and pronator quadratus. So we've got some really nice names here for the muscles, and they're going to help us out a lot in telling us where they're going to be originating, inserting, and what their action can do. Let's talk about their innervation. These are all going to be innervated by the median nerve. Okay, so all the deep, the 1 intermediate, and most of the superficial are going to be innervated by the median nerve. The only one that's not is the flexor carpi ulnaris, and it's right there in the name, so it'll tell you that it's actually the ulnar nerve that innervates it. Okay, so let's talk about pronator quadratus first. So quadratus is referring to 4, and so you can kind of make like 4 points of this muscle. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it kind of makes like a square almost, having 4 points. So its origin is going to be on the distal surface of the ulna. Okay, so right here on the ulna, and then it stretches across the entirety of the forearm, and it's going to insert on the distal radius. So again, it's a quadratus, so it makes the 4 points on this distal side, or distal end of the forearm. Okay, and so it is the most deep, as you can see. So that name right there, quadratus, should help you out with kind of understanding where the origin and the insertion is, so you can make a square on the distal end of the forearm. Okay, now the name pronator should also give you indication as to what the action is going to be. It's going to pronate the hand. Okay, so that means if you're pronating, that means it has to be attaching to the radius. It has to be moving the radius. So if you can't remember which bone it originates or which bone it inserts on, recognize pronator. Okay, that means it's going to pronate. That means it's going to move the radius. If it's moving the radius, that means it has to be inserting on the radius. Okay, so pronator quadratus. Okay, so then let's go to the flexor digitorum profundus, right? So that's the one that we abbreviate with FDP. Okay, so FDP, flexor digitorum profundus, is a more medial muscle, so it is going to be on the ulna side. Okay, so it's going to, I don't know, you could kind of see like profundus, the UN. So it's on the ulna side. All right. So it's going to originate just on the proximal ulna and also the interosus membrane. So you can see that membrane between the radius and the ulna. Okay. And then it's going to come down and insert all the way onto the distal phalanx of 2, 3, 4, and 5. Very similar to FDS, right? So flexor digitorum superficialis was also going to be inserting down on phalanges 2, 3, 4, and 5, except FDS is on the medial and FDP is all the way down on the distal. Okay. So it's going to have the same action as flexor digitorum superficialis. It's going to flex the hand at the wrist, but it's also going to flex the fingers at that distal joint. Okay. And then flexor pollicis longus, if we look at this word right here, pollicis, it's referring to pollex. All right, so this is the one that's going to go to the thumb. And we know that the thumb is on the lateral side of the body. So if we were having trouble remembering, is flexor pollicis longus on the lateral or is flexor digitorum profundus on the lateral? Pollex is on the lateral. Okay, your thumb faces laterally in the anatomical position. So flexor digitorum profundus has to be on the ulnar side. Okay, so flexor pollicis longus is going to be on originating on middle radius because it's on the lateral side and radial is always lateral. It's on pollicis, it's on the same side as the thumb. Okay, but it also is going to be originating at that interosus membrane. Okay, so because it's pollicis is in the name, it's on the radial side, it's going to be inserting down onto the distal phalanx of the thumb, all the way onto that distal phalanx of the thumb. Okay, so because it's on the thumb, it's going to be responsible for flexing the thumb. All right, so these names really should be helping you out to understand the origin, insertions, and actions. Okay, and again, they are all innervated by that median nerve. We do have a review slide here where we can go over the with the superficial first, the 1 intermediate, and the 3 deep muscles, right, of the forearm, the anterior side of the forearm. So if you need to practice, you absolutely can with these images. Again, the pronator teres is that more obvious one, very short, doesn't come down over the wrist, right? We have the more medial one on the pinky side, that's going to be your flexor carpi ulnaris. The number 2 would be the flexor carpi radialis, and the one in the center, number 3, going to the palmar region would be the palmaris longus. And then 5, of course, is that 1 intermediate, the flexor digitorum superficialis, FDS. And then we have our deep muscles here. We have that pronator quadratus, right, extending across the distal region of the forearm, making the 4 corners, quadratus, right? And then we can see that this is going to be the thumb side, okay? And so this is going to be your flexor pollicis longus, sorry. And then we have the flexor digitorum profundus at 6. And you can see that it's going to be extending down onto those distal phalanges 2 through 5. And this one Flexor pollicis longus would only be going down to the thumb, the distal phalanx of the thumb.